Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. It is the Monday, February 16th, 2026 episode of The Marco Jure Show. Thank you for tuning in to hear today's groundbreaking news right here in America and across the board, where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Let's begin the best hour of radio, informative, uncensored, unapologetic, and ready to go. Happy President's Day, too, by the way. Obviously, that's what today is, a day to commemorate Washington and Lincoln's birthdays alike. And by the way, I also like to include Reagan in that as well. He was born in February, too. Probably our last greatest presidents that we've had, I'd have to say, in modern times. You know what I want to do, though, today? I want to talk about some of Washington's farewell address with you, just to start things off today, and kind of relate it into where we're going with today's show. Now, the farewell address, written in 1796, when it was then published. And by the way, as many of you know, I believe our country is really so far off base to where we were then, and of course the intentions of our founding fathers. Really, we're almost in a foreign nation, if you will, if I can use that term to describe America today, to really what the founding fathers intended the country to be. Small central governments, free market capitalism, autonomy of the people, the citizenry, and of course, serving one's own life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness without the threat of this looming government over their heads. Now, certainly, very little of our societal norms today represent those values. Even by the time Lincoln, whom also we're remembering today, was president, those visions were really, in and of itself, lost, sadly enough. Let's talk about Washington's farewell address. And this is going to relate to a lot of what we're talking about today. Lots of what we're talking about regarding foreign policy. And I want to read you just a couple of these statements because they're very interesting and they're very important as well to understand this. And this is not being taught anywhere. How many of you were taught Washington's farewell address? Probably very few of you listening can even really remember much of it. The 16,000-word essay itself sheds so much light onto what Washington thought the country should be doing. What should the country do as he leaves this office? Which he willfully did too, by the way. He didn't have to do that. But he said, let me step aside and let another citizen come up and take over this executive branch and continue to lead the country. He could have been King Washington for all we know. How many people today do you know that would abdicate their position for obviously the great sum of money that they get, the power they get, the decisions they get to make over everybody else? How many people do you think would do that today if they were said, hey, you could be president for the rest of your life if you like? We'll suspend elections, we'll do all this. How many people, just in general, will sit there and go, you know what? I want to stay according to the Constitution. I want to stay according to the rule of law. How many people do you think would abide by that? And again, that just goes to show Washington's own character, that he was able to go ahead and do that and be that leading example for us. Not a perfect man by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly a man of honor. Let me read you part of what he said about the foreign policy that the United States should embark on after he left office. Now, in this part, he says, it is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. So far, I mean, as we are now at liberty to do it. For let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing entanglements. He then says, against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens. The jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful woes of Republican government. But that jealousy to be useful must be impartial, else it becomes the instrument of the very influence to be avoided. Instead of a defense against it, as excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another cause those whom they actuate to see danger only on one side and serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on another. Real patriots, whom may resist the intrigues of the favorite, are liable to become suspected and odious, while the tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interests. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is, in extending our commercial relations, to have with them as little political connection as possible. That was Washington, folks. Now, what is he saying there to sum it all up? Well, he's saying we want as little contact, little relations politically, little entanglements around the globe as possible. Don't get involved in all this. Don't favor another country over another country. It's only going to lead you to get involved with what that one country is doing that you so greatly like. We can look at Woodrow Wilson in World War I. His ethnicity was that of England. He had a liking of England. And that was his major reason to get us into this war, among other things. And there's a bigger history behind that, of course. But that was one of the things that he used. And look at that. Now, all of a sudden, we're fighting a war in Europe that we had no business being a part of. We can look at so many other different things and other different wars, other different policies we've taken, really, that have no bearing on what we should be doing. We should always be looking for, obviously, free market capitalism around the world, trading and supporting those policies wherever we can, wherever they benefit America as a whole. That's what we should be. Not being in these foreign wars, not being in all these different councils or committees or a board of peace, as we call it now, and what's taking place in Gaza. We should be avoiding all that. We shouldn't be involved in all that. We should be focusing on what's taking place here in America. That's what we should do. And some people are going to call that isolationism. I don't really view it as that. I have no problem with diplomacy with other nations. I've told you this time and time again. But this idea that something takes place in Europe or Asia or Africa, or even in our own hemispheres, that we have to suddenly just jump right to it and get involved in it. 800, I think it's 800 now is the number. At one point it was 750. I believe it's 800 though still. 800 military bases all across the world. Is that what you think Washington would say is something important to obviously fund and utilize 800 military bases all across the globe? Something tells me he would not be a part of that. Just a hunch, folks. Just a hunch that he wouldn't be a part of that. Now, this reflects greatly to my next article of business that we're going to discuss right now. And this is in The Hill. It's talking about how Marco Rubio had a speech, obviously, in Munich just recently over the weekend. And it was a great speech, by the way, for the most part. We're going to dissect that in just a moment. But he blasts the dangerous delusions on migration, things like climate policy, and what have you there. And the speech was met with great applause. It was actually a pretty good speech. And you know me, I'm not a fan of Marco Rubio's at all, by the way, just as most of you know this. But I want to read you part of this. And we'll actually I'll play some clips of him speaking, because I want you to hear this. It was actually not a bad speech. But one of the first things that he said was, "We believe that Europe must survive because the two great wars of the last century serve for us as history, constant reminders that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours." Now, that's not a problem to say that. Obviously, the country by itself, obviously, we had Great Britain was here, we had part of Spain that was here, the French were here on this continent, and obviously we acquired more land, but those influences were there. The people that came to this country, for the most part of the country's history, were that of people coming from Europe. Obviously, people from other parts of the globe have come here since. We could talk about the Immigration Reform Act of 1965 that changed all that. Regardless of the fact, the roots of Europe were greatly intertwined with American culture. That's what it thrived on. Really, the Scottish, the English influences in the country early on, We're talking about things like laws and what have you, other parts of culture from different parts of the world. In Europe, we're greatly influenced here in the United States. And really, they made the country really what it is today, by and large. And he's not wrong by saying that, by the way. Now, he adds that the euphoria at the end of the Cold War, he gets into that, resulted in a dangerous delusion that we had entered the end of history, where nations would live in a world without borders, where everyone became a citizen of the world. Now, this is really indicative, of course, of where we are today as a nation, and of course, where many European countries are. We don't enforce our borders. We have millions of illegal aliens here. We have millions of people that are residing here that have expired visas. They don't belong here, and we're not really enforcing them. That's adding to change the climate of the country. We see this with the students leaving different various high schools across the country now in an effort to speak out against ICE, and we're seeing that those are getting more violent as time goes on. Over the weekend, I saw video footage of high school teenagers attacking ICE agents in downtown Los Angeles. I guess a good use of the school day, folks. Don't you think so? I'm going to play you part of what he said, though. This, again, it was a great speech, a very American, rah-rah speech, but again, it also linked the importance that we would like to see Europe do better. Now, at the same time, though, he's also referring to the fact that the UN is not really serving its purpose. We're seeing that Trump is kind of moving away from a lot of these world organizations. I'm not opposed to all that, by the way. Some of these world organizations are essentially useless. Not all of them, but some of them are. Some of them we're spending a lot of money on and getting very little in return for. So I'm not opposed to us leaving things, but Trump is very, I guess I'd conclude by saying he wants to kind of be on his own to an extent. And that's kind of what Rubio is referring to in part of this speech. But at the same time, he's saying, let's let the United States lead the way. Because what's taking place in the UN, for example, isn't really doing much for the world. It's not making Europe better. It's not making the United States better. It's not making really any place much better. And we see that with the all-out wars that we're talking about here today. But I want to play you a part of what he said to start off. And this is him on the mistakes that we've taken over time since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Take a listen.
We made these mistakes together. And now, together, we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward, to rebuild. Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, if necessary, to do this alone, it is our preference and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe. For the United States and Europe, we belong together. America was founded 250 years ago, but the roots began here on this continent long before. The men who settled and built the nation of my birth arrived on our shores carrying the memories and the traditions and the Christian faith of their ancestors as a sacred inheritance, an unbreakable link between the old world and the new. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir.
Now, that was, I got to tell you, whoever wrote this for him, did a hell of a job. This was a very, very good speech, especially at that point. A very, very solid speech. But really what he's doing in that part of the speech, he is rejecting the global community as far as the UN is concerned. And he's saying, hey, look, we've got to take this mantle, I guess, right? We've got to take this, and we're going to start leading now, because the old way that we were working on, again, globalism, these policies by especially the EU that were taken upon various countries across Europe that said, hey, we're going to open up our borders to the entire world. And really, he's reflecting to what the leftist Democrats in America are doing. Open the border up, no humans illegal, let's let everyone come in. We'll share our culture with you, you'll share your culture with ours, it'll be a melting pot. Again, the idea of a melting pot is really in itself kind of ridiculous when you think about it. And people say, well, what we mean by melting is we all come together, we agree on American values. That's not the case, though. That's not really the case in many situations. We're not seeing the assimilation anymore. And when one group of people will assimilate, we'll also have to see, for example, that today that is foreign to us. We don't expect people to assimilate anymore. That doesn't happen. You call some, customer service line, speak 1 for this language, 2 for this language, 3 for this language. What country do I live in anymore? I'm not saying people don't need help, all right? I understand that. But when you have ballots in various different languages, you have to ask yourself something. Wait a minute. If you're going to come to a different country, if I were to move to, let's say I moved back to Italy, where my roots are, I wouldn't go there and expect everyone to just speak English to me. I would imagine they would expect that I would learn Italian and speak Italian, embrace the culture, and what have you, make it a better place. That's the purpose of immigration. That's the purpose of migration. So while anyone can come to the United States and become an American, you have to learn how to assimilate, speak the language, accept the culture, accept the societal norms, the values, the way the government operates, your responsibility as a citizen to provide for yourself, not demand somebody else to do it for you. So when I say we're so far away from what Washington believed, and of course what the Founding Fathers believed, we're seeing this play out right now here in America, but we're also seeing it take place inside Europe. And when we see plummeting birth rates across Europe, the United States, mostly the Western world as well, we have to ask ourselves, what are we conserving? What are we maintaining right now, though? Are we making policies that are making people want to have families? Are we reflecting those values that Marco Rubio discussed, which I was very happy to hear him say that. The whole time I was watching, I'm like, he better say something about Christianity. And sure enough, he mentioned it several times. Yes, we have a connection to Christian values. And those Christian values mean that, yes, we govern ourselves. Of course, we have people overseeing. But by and large, I don't have anyone saying, you must do this, you must do that. You are in charge of your own destiny. And that's what makes culture so very much important. And then he hones it on this on clip 2. Take a listen.
Was here in Europe, where the ideas that planted the seeds of liberty that changed the world were born. It was here in Europe, where which gave the world the rule of law, the universities, and the scientific revolution. It was this continent that produced the genius of Mozart and Beethoven, of Dante and Shakespeare, of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And this is the place where the vaulted ceilings of the Sistine Chapel and the towering spires of the great cathedral in Cologne, they testify not just to the greatness of our past or to a faith in God that inspired these marvels. They foreshadow the wonders that await us in our future. But only if we are unapologetic in our heritage and proud of this common inheritance can we together begin the work of envisioning and shaping our economic and our political future.
Really, that part was brilliant too. But what is he referring to? Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Everyone believes we're here based in the image of God. We're unique. Every single individual is unique. And we will serve that purpose of our likes, of our interests, of our values. I'm not a great painter, so I'm obviously not going to be doing any Mona Lisas anytime soon. But I find something that I like, something I'm good at, and I pursue that, and I excel at that. That's how the culture was supposed to work. That's how society was supposed to work. Some people are great at building things. They pursue that. They have a way to, obviously, use those services to become successful, to create a living, to serve your fellow community. And everything he's saying there is very true. We have the ingenuity We have the resources. We have the ability to freely choose our own paths. That's why we got such beautiful architecture, sculptures, buildings, you name it. The ability to make and create new inventions. And we have the boom of the Industrial Revolution. All of these things are very, very key to Western society. And of course, we've shared that with the rest of the world. But this is so central to who we are as Americans and, of course, Europeans as well. And as, again, we share that with the other parts of the world, they become more modernized. They become more industrial. They start to learn and build on their own. And so he's very much spot on this, I have to say. And again, I'm very glad to hear him mention the idea, of course, of the pursuit with God in mind too. Our God-given talents, our God-given rights. All these things come from one central place, from Christianity. That's what it comes down to. And at a time like it is today, where Christianity is under attack in so many parts of the world, the places where we see that freedom, by and large, we see, obviously, those societies grow. When people can freely preach and express themselves. That's what makes the Constitution so very much important. And at a time where we're seeing places like in the UK, where people are getting arrested for tweets online, people are getting arrested for holding up a sign that the government doesn't agree with, for example, in the UK, among many places. We see it in other parts of Europe too. But this is what we're talking about. We have to take a step back and say, listen, are we going to go the way of communism, or are we going to go the way of capitalism and Christianity? Which way are we going to choose? The last thing I want to play from Rubio is where he kind of really dissects. This part I kind of disagree with in some regard, and we'll break it down afterwards. But what he's talking about as far as the viability of the United Nations and how is it important, is it a necessity to continue with this process, or shall we move on to something else? And I think that's where Trump's thinking is right now. We see this taking place with the Board of Peace. It's kind of outside of the UN, yes? And he's making his own coalition with other countries. He's charging him a nice fee, too, by the way. But this is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing countries, especially the United States, kind of saying, listen, we don't need NATO, we don't need the EU, we don't really need the UN. What we want to do is kind of move away from this. We'll create our own boards, our own coalitions, our own committees, and we will govern accordingly to ourselves. Now, I'm not sure what international law binding activity that will be, unless, of course, it's a treaty signed between many different nations, of course. But this is the path we're taking. We're kind of saying, you know what, this is kind of the old world, the United Nations, the EU, NATO, this and that, the Warsaw Pact, all this good stuff. We're kind of moving away from this now. And I don't know what future pacts it'll be. I don't know if it'll be World Economic Forum. I don't know if it'll be the Council on Foreign Relations, God forbid, or the Trilateral Commission, or these other commissions that we find ourselves intertwined with. Obviously, you know my stance on that. We should be away from all this. We should be worrying about our own selves. We should be working on diplomacy and treaties with other nations. Economically, of course. Strategically. But listen to his repudiation of the United Nations in this piece.
We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored. And we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice.
So he says a lot there on this part, and we've got to break it down. So again, he starts to repudiate, hey, the UN can be a force for good. Okay, it could be good, it could be bad, it might not do anything, it might be null and void, we don't know. We see all these conflicts taking place all over the world, of which I think there is 193 different member states of the UN, if I'm not mistaken. Yet somehow we continue to see conflicts between various nations all over the world. Asia, Africa, Europe, South America, North America, all these conflicts that take place. And at first I was agreeing with everything he was saying. I'm like, well, this is good, this is right, he's not wrong about this. But then he goes off and starts talking about our involvement in various different things. And one of the first things he mentioned is the war in Gaza. Now, the war in Gaza only takes place, folks, because we give Israel the money to go ahead and do all that. We pay for every bomb, bullet, anything they can imagine. We pay for their entire military. So without us, that war wouldn't have happened. It just wouldn't be happening, at least to the extent at which we're seeing it right now. And when he talks about the resolution to it, we have to understand something. There is no ceasefire. We have turned our back on that ceasefire. We've talked about a board of peace, but there is no essential ceasefire taking place. On average, you have 20 to 30 different Palestinians killed every single day since that ceasefire, so-called, began. And you're not seeing that anywhere in the Western press. We're not seeing any of that. I wish he would have said something about that. We need a free press. Again, we don't have that. But for those of us that search for the truth, search for, obviously, good research and good answers from people that know what the hell they're talking about, we could say definitively that, yes, this war is still going on. They're still shelling people. There's still airstrikes taking place inside Gaza. There's still people suffering. And no one's saying a damn thing about it. So if we're going to be this new beacon of light in the world, why aren't we saying anything about this? How come we're not saying anything about this happening? Obviously, we're told ad nauseum that Israel is one of our greatest allies. Fine, okay, fine, whatever. I don't believe that, but okay, let's say that's true. Why aren't we saying, wait a minute, we're supposed to be in a ceasefire, you're continuing to bomb these people. This is unacceptable. We're not going to allow any more aid to you then. We're going to have to come in and obviously take a stand against this. We'll put our own troops in the region into Gaza to make sure they're not attacking Israel, okay? But we're not seeing any of that. We're just saying, oh, ceasefire. Look the other way. Don't worry about what's taking place. They're behind this imaginary yellow line, right? They're supposed to be out of, I think, 42% of Gaza or something like that. First of all, Israel's presence inside Gaza in and of itself is illegal by UN Charter Article 242, by the way. That's totally illegal for them to occupy any territory inside the West Bank or inside Gaza. But yeah, there they are. And we hear the stories. We see what takes place. We hear about olive groves and olive trees set ablaze. We hear people getting shot and killed by the IDF inside the West Bank. Same thing happens inside Gaza, too. So he's right. Where is the UN? They are violating the UN Charter 242. Where is the UN? Who steps in? And this is where we need to make things better. That's international law that's being violated. That's international law when they say that no humanitarian aid can enter the region for 3 months. Yet Marco Rubio only calls one side barbarians. And I don't like to use the word barbarians, whatever. But this is how we're labeling people. So only Hamas is barbaric, and yet starving, bombing people ad nauseum, indiscriminately, starving people intentionally, shooting at men when they're trying to cross the Moab corridor, to the last final food bank in the region, because all the other ones have left, getting shot at by the IDF. Has that been reported anywhere in the U.S. press? Of course not. So I was a little bit, miffed a little bit. He could have ended it a little bit differently than this. But this is what his stance was. And then, of course, he talks about the Ukraine war. And then I kind of laughed a little bit because I'm like, well, Rubio, you are the Secretary of State. You are the negotiator. You are like our prime minister. You are the person that's supposed to go there and present our ideas, our treaties with other countries, our terms of peace. Why aren't you doing that? Instead, we're sending Witkoff, Kushner, who have really no title, and they have really no focus and really no understanding of the region, probably like Rubio does at least, even though he has an angle on this. But I had to say to myself, well, you are the top negotiator. So if we're not seeing any resolution to the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, what's brewing up between us and Iran, you are the lead negotiator, Secretary. You should be there working on behalf of all the people in the region to promote peace and stability. Instead, we're not seeing that. Why is Kushner and Witkoff going in place of you? Well, obviously, I don't think Trump is too fond of Rubio. That's why he sends him on these little tasks. But this is where we are, though. So if we can't broker this, then who are we to say that the UN should just be, kind of obsolete at this point? Now, it's kind of necessary. It could be good, but we don't really need it. And really, that's been Trump's stance for quite some time now. When he was asked by the New York Times editors just recently, they said, what do you think about international law? He goes, well, I don't really need international law. I'm not looking to hurt anybody. Well, folks, I want to tell you the truth. International law, anything signed by the United States that is a treaty, becomes the law of the land. That is enshrined in our Constitution that we must follow that. We have agreed to that. And Rubio said this in his speech. He said laws that we created, and he's right. A lot of these laws that we're breaking right now are UN Charter laws written by us that are signed by a U.S. president. And, of course, become American law, become constitutional. And yet we see us breaking that in Venezuela. We see us breaking that in the high seas. All these things that are taking place right now. And now we're seeing this heat up between us and Iran. Now, thankfully, that hasn't taken place yet, but that is the next step, is the war in Iran on behalf of the nation state of Israel. Now, one can only imagine what Washington would say about that. By the way, I want to say this, too. Gavin Newsom and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez were also in Munich this weekend. Why, I have absolutely no idea. But here was AOC. She was asked about foreign policy, and as one could imagine, she started to fumble the question. When she goes off script, she's not as good. So let's just be honest with you. When she's off script, when she's asked off the cuff, she tends to be a little stupid. I think we can all agree on that. But anyway, I want to play you a little bit of her speaking. And she drops the ball very, very good. And this is, by the way, this is another viable candidate for the Democratic Party, besides Gavin Newsom, who more than likely will get this candidacy. I'm just saying it, what I believe right now. I think as of right now, at least, he's going to be the person that the Democrats try to go with. Despite all of his blunders, despite all of his failures, despite him destroying the state of California, this is probably going to be their guy. Because even though he just speaks nothing but nonsense, he speaks the nonsense very good. He's clean-shaven and what have you. The clean-cut American look, that's Gavin Newsom. And people like that. People do. That's pretty stupid. I'd look at policy over how somebody looks, but that's the way Americans are. Very vain. Very vain. So AOC was asked about foreign policy. And this is kind of the latter half of her speaking about it. Take a listen.
I think that what is best is for when we sign an agreement and when we're a part of it, we stay in it, so that they know that our commitments are reflective of our nation's values in a way that transcends partisanship. And so I think that instability is one, but then the other, I think it is hand in hand with the volatility. On one hand, it goes far beyond just agreements, and it goes into real aberrations, I think, in interventionism, in I think a turning back on our commitment on human rights, as well as supercharging an economic regime that fuels the 1%. And I think that piece is the most concerning for everyday people.
So she circled back to, obviously, the top 1%. That was the other thing that registered in the 7 neurons in her brain still. I think that, the intervention and, the top 1% of 1%, they're stealing all the land. Well, that's probably true. That's not what she asked you, though, idiot. She had no answer. So I played you a little bit of what her response was there. But anytime this woman speaks, off the cuff, anytime you see her, she has no real, she's just like Greta Thunberg. Ask the question, pass. I don't have my script in front of me yet. When they don't have the scripts in front of them, they don't know what to say. They don't know how to articulate because they don't have any values. They don't have any policy positions. They just speak nonsense and hope that, everything goes well for them. That's AOC. And Gavin Newsom's a little different. Gavin Newsom can spin things. He can talk about things. He can lie about things. And he does it with a big smile on his face. He doesn't get choked up. He just keeps moving forward, even if he is deflecting it from answering the question. AOC is not that intelligent, so therefore she's sitting there going, well, I think, I don't know. I just don't know. But I think intervention, I think, yeah, there you go. That's the Democratic Party for you today. Anyway, folks, so that was Rubio. That was the speech he made. Overall, a very good speech. Very, again, Reagan-esque. I like the speech overall. Some things, obviously, I disagree with. But overall, it was a very good speech. He did get a standing ovation. And it's good to let people know that, yes, we want to come in. We want to, obviously, create peace in the world. We want to be that beacon of peace. I think President Trump needs to be reined in, though, a little bit. I don't think we should be talking about taking over Greenland by force, or Cuba by force, or Colombia, or going into Venezuela in violation of the Constitution, by the way. And Rubio should know this. He's a lawyer. To bring someone on trumped-up drug charges, of course, which are really, really asinine if you look at the case and the ownership of machine guns inside Venezuela. I don't know who wrote that for Pam Bondi, but that was a really stupid thing to do, too. So there you go. There's Rubio. That's good that he made our position well known. We want peace in the world, yes. We want the United States to survive. We want Europe to survive. We should be pushing for these nation states to survive. Absolutely. 100%. But one of the things he should have said was, listen, we need to get our birth rates up. Absolutely. We need to increase, obviously, our industrialization again. We've outsourced all across the globe. Let's bring them back to the United States, to Europe, what have you. Let's thrive once again. Let's do that. And that's something I'm certainly not opposed to at all. The one thing I am opposed to, though, and that's one of the things that he said, was the immigration-invader problem that we see right now. And this is taking place in Europe. It's taking place in America. And again, it's all by design, too, by the way. We did this to ourselves. Earlier, I discussed the Immigration Reform Act of 1965. That took the formula that allowed for mostly European ancestry to come to the United States, and it opened the floodgates for the entire world to come in. And if you look at immigration since then, you see mostly it's coming in from the third world, not coming in from Europe, from obviously the West. That was all done by design. So never forget that took place as well. Of course, we can thank LBJ for that. And of course, good old Teddy Kennedy, the good old carousing Teddy Kennedy for that. And of course, Hart Celler for that as well. That's what the act was called originally. But listen to this. This is from Paul Craig Roberts. He says, President Trump, for all of his talk, proved to be no match for the Democratic-backed immigration invaders that took place inside Minneapolis. ICE pulled its 700 federal troops off the job of rounding up and deporting illegal aliens in Blue, Minnesota, which is where they should be right now. Now, since then, Tom Homan has come out and said, we're going to keep a couple officials back to continue these operations, but we're cutting down significantly. I think that's a wrong move. I don't like that move. I think that was waving a white flag. That's just the way I look at it. Now, in testimony before Congress, ICE Director Todd Lyons had to justify 1.6 million deportation orders on the grounds that 800,000 of them, of these deportees, had actual criminal records. Every one of the ordered deportations can be appealed, though. That's what we have to understand. Every one of the ordered deportations can be appealed. And on the number of ordered deportations is a small percentage of illegal aliens population inside the country. 1.6 million doesn't even scratch the surface. You know this because I've told you this. We don't have 22 million. We've heard that number 22 for how long? And even if we take it at face value that, hey, we had 22 million when Biden took office back in 2021, he let almost 20 million come in the country while deporting very, very few of them. So if we add 20 to 22 million, 25 million folks, we've got about 45 million illegal aliens, 45 million illegal aliens in this country right now. We're only talking about deporting 1.6 million of them. We're not even talking about the 55 million expired visa holders that still reside in this country. Lots of problems with ICE. But a lot of it is being held out by the Democrat, by these activist judges. You're going to hear about one of them momentarily. So moreover, though, we've got the Department of Homeland Security, which, again, houses ICE. Now we're talking about facing a shutdown from, again, the Democratic Party. Their refusal to fund it now. This is their strategy. They can't refute the law, so now they've got to start talking about defunding it. We've seen this taking place with other acts in Congress throughout the years. We can talk about the HUAC, the House of Un-American Activities Committee. That got done away with because they stopped funding it. They said, this is too much. This is anti-American. We shouldn't do this anymore. And so we stopped looking at un-American activities that take place in the country. I think we should bring HUAC back. Why not? We've got plenty of it in this country. Look at the illegal Chinese biolabs we're finding all over the country now. Does that not pose a threat to Americans? American citizens? I think it does. So illegals are not citizens. We have to understand this. And I got an argument over the weekend with someone about this. Someone said, no one is illegal. I said, the hell they aren't. If no one's illegal, then no nation has citizens. Sovereignty means absolutely nothing. And this was a little bit of the basis of what Rubio was talking about. We have to be a nation of citizens, not a nation of every single person in the world that wants to come someplace. The Michelle Wu outlook that we heard about recently from her, oh my goodness. Anyone that wants to come in the country should just come in the country? What the hell? So we don't have a nation then. We don't have a nation. That's really what it comes down. This is what these people want. They don't want borders. They want to destroy the country from within. That's the only way they can do it, is through illegal immigration into the country. So if, illegals are not citizens, and they're, again, not entitled to the rights that citizens have under the Constitution. Now, Paul Roberts said that. I disagree with parts of it. They are still given due process and what have you. But they should not be given, obviously, the right to free health care, free housing, free schooling. If we cut that off, if we close the spigot on all that, so listen, you can't get a house. You don't have the paperwork to get a house. So we're not going to put you up in this house. We're not going to give you free health care. We're not going to put your kids in school. We're not going to give you SNAP benefits. We're not going to allow you to get a job. You can't work illegally. You've got to show proper documentation. Can't drive a car. You can't buy a car. That alone would simply start to deter people from coming here illegally. When they know they can come here and get on welfare, get on all these social welfare programs, for example, when they know they can work under the table, when they know they can continue to operate in various cities and states that are so-called sanctuary cities, that enables the bad behavior. And I don't disagree that people obviously want to come here. I understand why people want to come here. I understand their plight in their countries of origin. I understand this. Wanting to come to America does not make somebody a bad person. But when you break the rule of law, the first thing you do when you step foot in this country is breaking the law, which again is federal immigration law. It is a federal crime to do, whether it be a misdemeanor or a felony, is regardless. You're still breaking the law before you even do anything when you come in this country. And by the way, too, I want to mention this as well. When he talks about having criminal records, if you get a DWI, if you're dealing drugs, if you are committing battery or assault on someone, those are not considered criminal offenses, too, by the way, in terms of what ICE is recording for us. So there's a whole slew of things people can be doing that are obviously illegal, but they're not going to be showing up as a criminal record. So I wanted to point that out to you as well, just so, again, we're clear on all this. Again, but there's so many things that, obviously, if you're here illegally and you're getting false documentation, if you're obviously working under the table, if you're driving a car illegally with obviously a faulty driver's license, if you're enrolling in school and what have you, obviously that's illegal too. There's a problem with all this. There's a problem with every single part of it. That being said, the Constitution, among other things, does apply to you in terms of due process, the Fourth Amendment. And you have to understand the language of the Constitution proves this. When it says no person, it doesn't say no citizen. It says no person. Now, some people say, well, they mean person of the United States. Well, that's not what it says, though, folks. So we have to understand that, yes, even though someone's here illegally, they have a right to due process. That's the way the Constitution is written. Now, does that mean they're given every single right under the Constitution? No, they don't have a right to bear arms. They're not a citizen. That's another problem we have in this country. But as far as the law is concerned, when you are being charged, you have a right to due process, whether you're a citizen or not. But here we go. Democrats want to object to warrantless arrest of non-citizens. Now, again, this is where I disagree with what Paul Craig Roberts is saying because of the wording of the Constitution. This is why I disagree with what he's saying in terms they could just enter a house and say, hey, we're here to take you. Everyone has still got to be given due process. Now, people like Bill O'Reilly, for example, say this is ridiculous because there's so many millions of illegal aliens. How are you going to get a judge to sign off on a warrant for people we don't even know who the hell they really are till we arrest them? This becomes a problem. This becomes a massive problem in this country. This is what happens when you do not secure your southern border. This is what happens when you give freebies to people. So here's what I say, though. Just recently in California, about 500,000 people were turned away from jury duty. You know the reason why? They had a driver's license, but they're not American citizens. So that tells me one thing. Okay, so you know who these people are, these 500,000 people are, because you issued them this jury duty summons. You want to work with ICE to show, hey, so-and-so lives at this address, and they're not an American citizen, but they have an ID, probably because the state, since 2014, has been giving out fake driver's license to illegal aliens. That's a big problem. There are ways to go about doing this, though. And that, yes, you can kind of expedite this process. You can get the people to write these warrants out. It's going to take a long time, but, you know, signature here, signature there. Come on, get this going. Again, you have to follow due process. You have to. Because if they can go into someone's home just because they think you're illegal, that means they can just go wherever they want. If you say, hey, they can stop somebody on the street and say, show me your papers, they can do that to you too. This is the slippery slope we're getting in with this. And I understand his point. These people are non-citizens, therefore they shouldn't have the rights under the Constitution that we're given. But the problem is the wording of the Constitution does not specify that. It says no persons. And again, we have to follow the rule of law. So now we've got obviously the Democrats encouraging more violence amongst federal agents and what have you. We're hearing from people like the Democratic Attorney General in the state of Arizona, Chris Mays, going on to say use deadly force against ICE agents if they're entering your home. If those protesting or, again, resisting this federal authority feel they're in danger, go ahead and do it. So we've got about 48% of the country, the American voting population, that are on the sides of these illegal aliens. Again, we talk about the future, where we're going. What sense does that make in the country going forward? Doesn't make any sense. Now, not all illegal aliens are freeloaders or criminals, even though they've committed a crime when they come in this country. Many of them take a job, they build a life. That's, part of the problem, though, because they shouldn't be taking those opportunities. And what people are saying is, well, these are jobs people don't want to work. No, the problem is people won't want to work those jobs. It's not that. It's people are not going to just take those jobs and be ripped off by them. That's what that's what it comes down to. People will work these jobs if you pay them accordingly, so they can actually have a future. They can have some way to live, even if it is a menial task. But these people, they use them, they get exploited. That's not right either, by the way. We shouldn't just be letting people in so we can exploit them for cheaper labor, which is exactly why the Republicans don't mind. And of course, the Democrats love the voting. They love the illegal voting. That's what it comes down to. And this is why the country is where it is today. So I'll end it with this. Yes, we secure our border. Yes, we need to follow the Constitution. Yes, we need to give them due process. But every single Western country faces economic and employment problems. The policy of open borders that has come to the characterization of all Western countries increases the pressures from, again, the resulting of limited environmental resources and declining jobs in those said countries. But of course, now they're existing in these countries as well. And a lot of it has to come at the expense and the exploitation of using illegal aliens for this process. All right, folks, let's move on. You know, I didn't realize I was going to spend so much time talking about just the issues of what Rubio was discussing today, but it's very important to understand this. We've got to understand where we're moving with these policies in this country right now. By the way, this is in Breitbart. It says that the Judge John DeGrales, appointed by Barry Obama, oh yeah, Barry from Chicago, released 4 violent criminals back into the American streets, and unfortunately the ramifications will only be continued of rape, murder, assault, robbery, you name it. That's okay with this activist judge. Totally fine. Doesn't matter at all. How do you release these people in this country? Let's just take a look at these 4 Grammy winners here. Ibrahim Ali Mohammed from Ethiopia, criminal illegal alien who's been convicted of sexual exploitation of a minor. An immigration judge ordered his removal in 2024, yet here he is for some reason. Was released by the Biden administration. No kidding. Luis Gaston Sanchez, criminal illegal alien from Cuba. Or Cuba, if you're Bernie Sanders. Who knows? He's from Cuba. Was convicted of homicide, assault, resisting an officer, concealing stolen property, and 2 counts of robbery. Ordered to be removed in 2001. How is he here 25 years later? Again, the system is broken. Let's fix the system. Let's focus on America. Ricardo Blanco Chomat, also from Cuba. Convicted of homicide, kidnapping, aggravated assault with a firearm. How did he get a firearm if he's an illegal alien? Oh, he bought it on the streets. Oh, of course. Burglary, larceny, and selling cocaine. Yep. Ordered to be removed in 2002, yet here he is in the United States still. Francisco Rodrigo Romero, illegal alien also from Cuba. All 3 from Cuba here. Wow. Convicted for homicide and offense with a weapon. Ordered to be removed by an immigration judge in 1995. Yet 31 years later, here he is in the United States. Last September, DHS partnered with the state of Louisiana to expand ICE detention and at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. Yet here these people are being released out in the public. It makes you sick, doesn't it, folks? You know, we were talking about the midterms coming up, and of course, Republicans' chances of winning and all this. Looking at USA Today, it says here that you do the midterm math, Trump's approval rating is at 36%, and MAGA has $304 million to spend. Let me just go out and say this to you. Trump's approval ratings are getting worse and worse and worse and worse as time goes on, especially with the Gen Zers, that group of people, the young Americans today coming into the workforce now, hoping to find some opportunity for themselves. He's lost 44% of their support from, I believe it was last summer, to right now. So you could throw money at anything. You can look at Hillary Clinton and see that throwing money at something just doesn't work. You have to have the policies that go along with it. Now, yes, historically, the people that have the most money are the people that are going to win. They can do all the fundraising, they can do all the reaching out and canvassing and all the fancy nonsense. It doesn't matter if you're losing in the policies, though, completely. And that's what's happening to Trump right now. He's got to understand this. You have to have policy that reflects what you're going to do for people. The people that are running in these races for Congress, for Senate, they've got to have the same policies too. But what Trump is doing is going to reflect those people. So if the House Congress is not doing anything under Mike Johnson, they say, well, this guy's not doing a damn thing. But Hakeem Jeffries is talking about, hey, we'll do this, 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 and this. It'll make my life better, according to what he's saying. That's a winning position. Mike Johnson should be figuring out a plan, kind of like what Newt Gingrich did way back in 94. And he's been saying, listen, as we move forward, this is the policies that we're going to be implementing. This is going to do this for you. This policy is going to do that for you. We're going to work with DHS. We're going to work with all these other different programs. And this is what we're going to do to save our citizenry, save our sovereignty. Open up these jobs, open up that jobs. There's got to be a plan and set in order to do this. And it needs to be done soon. Because the generals are taking place, well, obviously at the end of the year. But the primaries are coming up very, very soon in some states. Some start as early as March. He's got to kick things off. He's got to get things going very, very soon. Otherwise, we don't have anything. All right, moving on. New York Times, talking about what's taking place in Iran. Again, I'm very interested about this taking place, too. It says here that protesters are demanding regime change in Iran converged on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference in Germany on Saturday, a day after President Trump said that change in government would be the best outcome for a country reeling from deadly unrest. Well, unfortunately, the people of Iran don't believe this. But earlier this month, Reza Pahlavi, the son of the country's deposed Shah, and said as the opposition figure in exile, had encouraged protesters to take to the streets on February 14th to put pressure on the Iranian government. Speaking at the Munich conference on Friday, Mr. Pahlavi renewed an appeal for the American intervention inside Iran. So let me understand this. He is pushing for this war that'll turn into a greater regional war with other countries in the region coming to the side in aid of Iran. With obviously Israel that will be siding with us. I don't see any other countries that will be siding with us in the region. And that has the potential to bring in both China, who has stakes, and of course, in the region, and Russia as well. This is what they're encouraging right now, folks. Never forget who's encouraging this conflict. I've told you this war would be an all-out disaster. It'll topple the economies of Europe, which, again, we should be concerned with, and of Asia as well. Now, nuclear talks between the United States and Iran were expected to resume on Tuesday in Geneva this week, according to two American officials. By the way, that is going to be happening. Mr. Trump has ordered warships to the Persian Gulf. Yep, he sent the USS Gerald Ford on its way, signaling the readiness for potential strikes should negotiations collapse. Now, here's the problem. Here's the problem with all this. You can have 200,000 people in the protest in Munich. The people in Iran are not going along with this, though. That's a problem. Yes, of course, there are some people there that go along with this. But overall, you're not seeing that from the bulk of the people inside Iran. All 93 million of them are not behind this. And this is part of the problem. You're seeing it in factions across, Western Europe, South America, parts of America. They're saying, yes, do this regime change. You have the Lindsey Grahams of the world, right? That are going on saying all this. But the Iranian people that live in Iran, by and large, are not saying this right now. And it's up to them when they vote to, again, vote for this existing government they have. And by the way, just so we're all clear on this, just so we understand what's taking place, Iran now is meeting with UN nuclear watchdogs inside Geneva ahead of the second round of U.S. talks. So you have Foreign Minister Arachi meeting with Rafael Grossi, who's the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, he's also said he'll meet with the Foreign Minister of Oman again, which again is hosting the U.S.-Iran talks in Geneva this week. But he said this. He said, I'm in Geneva with real ideas to achieve a fair and equitable deal. That's what Arachi's saying. He wrote this on X. What is not on the table is submission before threats. So he's telling the United States right here, clearly, hey, we're not going to subdue ourselves. We're not going to kowtow because you're putting a fleet in the North Arabian Sea. We're not giving up our ballistics. We're not going to sever ties with our regional allies. And we're not going to do away with the entire nuclear program, even though we've told you time and time again, we're not building a nuclear weapon. But let me just end up saying this. You take this to the bank with you too. As this conflict goes on and as the threats of the United States invading and, of course, continuing with regime change, which is exactly what they want. They don't really care about the nuclear program because they know that's null and void. That's not happening. Iran said this. Obviously, Rafael Grossi has wrote a report about this. He's gone and inspected the nuclear programs inside of Iran. What this is going to end up doing, and especially to other countries in the region, what this is going to do, this threats of the United States attacking, and again, continuing a regime change. You can look at Libya too, by the way. They handed over their nuclear weapons. This is going to push Iran to the point of saying, maybe we should just build a nuclear weapon. So they'll say, look, this insane regime might use this. Is it going to push them and other countries in the region too to actually work on nuclear technology and actually just have it, just like what North Korea has? Again, folks, we don't have to look too far away in history to look at Gaddafi removing his nuclear technology. What happened to Gaddafi, folks? Well, they bayoneted him and they actually sodomized him with a bayonet too, by the way, and he's no longer in power because he's no longer alive anymore. Yeah, he turned over his technology and look what happened to him. Dead. Iran's looking at what's happening right now. They're assessing what's taking place. They're saying, look, we'll come to negotiations, but we're not giving up our sovereignty. We're not giving into regime change. We're not going to be threatened into doing this. And they've given us the ultimatum. They said, you invade? Okay. Your military bases, your oil fields, the refineries all across the Middle East, they're gone. They're done. They're null and void. I don't think Donald Trump wants his legacy to be known as that. I just don't think so, folks, even though I think it's inevitable at this point. Folks, thanks for being here. I appreciate you so much. Keep your minds and bodies strong. See you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Geray Show. Until then, be good. Stay busy. God bless.